Hello everyone, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Hannah if you're new here. Today's video we're doing the November wrap up, the books that I read in November. I have 13 books to talk about and that's only half of what I read. I was doing a Kindle Unlimited experiment, so if you haven't seen that video, go check it out. I read several books in that video, and I also did a bunch of rereads in November that I'm not going to rehash in this video. 13 is plenty to be getting on with. Let's start with the horror genre. I read 2 horror novels, and I'm in the middle of a third, actually. The first one we will talk about is actually Salt Slow by Julia Armfield. Julia Armfield is the author of Our Wives Under the Sea, which was one of my favorite reads of last year. She has a new release coming out imminently in December. I'm really excited. This is her short story collection of horror-ish, sci-fi, dystopian stories. And there are 9 stories in here with an average rating of 4.05. And so I rounded it up because I felt like it. I felt like Julia Armfield writes so poetically. It really is a poet at heart, and the combination of lyrical writing and weird horror stories really works for me. And so I really enjoyed this collection, and like I said, I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really like this author a lot. The other horror novel I was able to read was actually another short story collection, which is Queer Little Nightmares, and this is a collection of poetry and short stories from all different authors, kind of reframing the traditional monster stories from a queer perspective, and this was great. Instead of analyzing each individual story, I just kind of read this collection as a cohesive work, which was new. And, you know, I was talking about Salt Slow previously. That one I listened to each individual story one a day and was analyzing it and really thinking about it and soaking in the writing, which was a great experience. But for Queer Little Nightmares, I just decided to just kind of let it ride and just enjoy the overall experience of the collection as a whole. And I think that was a great choice because I ended up really enjoying this collection as well and gave it 4 stars. If I'd gone through and nitpicked every poem and every short story, it probably would have had a lower rating, but I think the overall vibe in general of the collection was really solid and gave it 4 stars. I actually got around to a couple of nonfiction as well. The first one we're going to talk about is The Radium Girls by Kate Moore. This is actually a subject I am familiar with. I watched the play adaptation of this historical events, these women who were painting radio dials with radium, and obviously lots of medical complications ensued, and there was lots of lawsuits and etc, etc, etc. And the one thing I will say about this particular nonfiction is the way that it was written. Even though the author's intention was to focus on the women themselves, not just the trials, not just the facts, but focus on the women and their lives, I still felt like the writing was keeping me at a physical distance from these people. And so they were going through horrible things, but I just felt myself a little kept at a distance. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but I think it would have been more, it could have been more compelling to me. So I ended up giving this like a 3.5, 4 stars. I think this is a really interesting topic. If you're interested, the play is fabulous as well. So I would recommend this one if this is a topic you're interested in. The other nonfiction I read is The Invisible Kingdom by Megan O'Rourke. This is about this author's journey with chronic illness, kind of figuring out her diagnoses, her journey. So it's part memoir, but it's also about chronic illness in America and you know, facts about that, and you know, the systems in place, healthcare system, kind of all of that wrapped into one. And I thought this was great. I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I thought this was particularly compelling. The author, I mean, I related to her on a lot of levels, but obviously we don't have the same diagnoses, but it was nice hearing from her. And she's a great writer too. I really think she did an excellent job with this nonfiction. I don't know what else to say about it, but obviously chronic illness is a topic that I'm particularly sensitive to, interested in. So, you know, again, I recommend this to people who are interested in the topic. It's a pretty short nonfiction as well. Let's talk about literary fiction. Who is she? I never read literary fiction, but I classify these two books as literary fiction with like a hint of magical realism or fantasy, like a little bit of magic. It's just like a teeny little bit. The first one we're going to be talking about is Sourdough by Robin Sloan. This is the third book I've read by this author, and I gave this again 4 stars. This is about a woman who inherits a sourdough starter from this restaurant that she always orders at. And it turns out that the sourdough may or may not be magical. And it's kind of about her finding a renewed purpose, becoming a baker, kind of finding a new passion, kind of turning her passion into her career, switching jobs, kind of all of that wrapped into one. And this is quirky, again, just like Robin Sloan's other works. Great writing, quirky plot and characters. This is probably my favorite. I think her name is Lois. Lois is my favorite Robin Sloan main character that I've come across so far. And this has a tiny itty bitty hint of romance, which I really enjoyed. This is also a short read. I gave Sourdough 4 stars. And then the other magical realism literary fiction I read, I finally finished Signal to Noise by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This is Silvia Moreno Garcia's debut novel that was republished in, I believe, 2022, and I was reading this physically. I got about 80 pages in, and I wasn't feeling it. I think I was just not in the mood for this, so I put it down temporarily. Finally picked it back up, and I'm so glad I did, because I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. This is a dual timeline story about Meche, who in the present timeline is returning to Mexico City to bury her father and go through his things and kind of reconnect with some people from her past. And then we're following Meche as a teenager and her friend group as they discover that they can cast spells using their records and record player, which I thought was very cool. And I love Silvia Moreno Garcia's unlikable female main characters. Meche is so angry and frustrating and incorrigible, and I loved her for that. She is so unlikable, and I like her because of it. I liked the hint of romance in here. I thought this was an excellent coming of age story, and I would classify this as literary fiction with a little bit of magic. And this is a slam dunk. Let's talk fantasy next. We've got one that I didn't particularly love, The Daughters of Istahar. This is a dual perspective sapphic, but the perspectives are not in the relationship. I just want to clarify that. Dual perspective sapphic Egyptian inspired fantasy story that has to do with elemental magic, and kind of like a brewing rebellion that's going on. And of course we have someone who is like from an upper class and someone from a lower class interacting, and kind of how their life changes as they fight for like women's rights in this country with magic. And I just thought this was all right. I thought the pacing was a little bit off. The magic was pretty cool. Reminded me a lot of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Not that that's a bad thing by any means. I just, again, felt a little bit emotionally distant from the stories and the story and these characters. And again, I think the pacing is what really threw me off. And I don't know if I'm going to read the second book. So I gave this 3 stars. This was fine to listen to, but not something that really captured me personally. Are you tired of me talking about Grace Draven yet? I read another Grace Draven. I believe I'm now all caught up with her full-length work now. So we're gonna have a Grace Draven break until she releases something else. The Ipos King. And this is the 3rd book in the Wraith Kings series. So the first 2 books in the series follow the same couple. And in this 3rd book, we are following a brand new couple. And the plot of this book would spoil the previous 2. But just know this one was pretty good. I give it a 4.25 stars. It's kind of opposites attract. It's kind of a romantic dynamic. She doesn't really want anything to do with him, and he kind of flirts and pursues her, and eventually they end up forming a romance while they're on an adventure, kind of a quest story. And I thought this was great. I love Grace Draven a lot. The last fantasy book I'm going to be talking about is The Fury of the Gods by John Gordon. I have already gushed about this book in my new releases recommendation video. This is the 3rd and final book in the Bloodsworn saga, which is a multi-perspective epic fantasy inspired by like Viking and Norse mythology, where gods are giants and are possibly returning is kind of the overall backdrop of this story. And in the first book, we're following 3 perspectives, and the most notable being Mommy Orca, who is on a revenge quest slash trying to retrieve her kidnapped son. This was a really good conclusion. I loved the action. There was a lot of action. This is a very plot forward story. There is some politicking, not quite as much. The balance is definitely on the action and the culmination of events. I love John Gwynne. I love him so much. I love his work. I love his epic fantasy. I really think he knows what he's doing, and this is one of his better conclusions to a trilogy, in my opinion. I give this one 5 stars. This was fabulous. We're ending on the romance genre, and the first one we're going to talk about is Don't Want You Like a Best Friend, which is a sapphic historical parent trap type story. So the 2 main characters each have a single parent, and in order for them to be together, the sapphic couple, they want their parents to get married. But also their parents like had history and were in love with each other before an arranged marriage separated them. So there's some lingering feelings there. And honestly, I was more invested in the parents' relationship than the children. The pacing of the sapphic romance in here was way too quick. They were saying I love you so fast. There was like a kiss and then an I love you, and it was just, there was no build up to that. From the 50 to the 80% mark, these characters are wrenched apart and separated and very contrived, and just really slogged the second half of the book way down. And overall, I was kind of disappointed in this one, sadly, and I ended up giving this one 2.5 out of 5 stars. I didn't really like this one. Then we have The Bodyguard by Catherine Center, which is a bodyguard romance featuring a movie actor who is a very private man and a female bodyguard, and she also has to fake date to be his girlfriend to kind of trick his parents into thinking he doesn't need a bodyguard. So she's pretending to be his girlfriend. Of course, real feelings ensue. And this was really sweet for a romance that is a little bit more chick lit leaning, a little bit less angsty, and you know, I like angsty type of romance quite a bit, and this one was very like lighthearted and fun in a lot of ways, but also like the stakes were pretty high. The main guy has a lot of like trauma. They both have a lot of trauma that they're working through, and there's like a bodyguard situation that happens with like very intense and very high stakes. So like, despite it being kind of a lighthearted tone and vibe, it also has these really high stakes, and like there's a lot going on emotionally with these individual characters, which I enjoyed, and I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I highly recommend it, and there is no smut in this one if that's your thing. It's not necessarily my thing, but there's something for everybody out there. And then we have to talk about Haley Cass, who is a new favorite author of mine officially. I will talk about the books as I read them in order, and the first one we're going to talk about is When You Least Expect It. This is a story about a divorce attorney. It's a sapphic story about a divorce attorney helping her ex-coworker's wife divorce him. Does that make sense? So like, she moved to a different law firm away from this trash guy, and then this other woman is like, hey, can you help me divorce him? He's a piece of shit, essentially. And they kind of bump into each other at a coffee shop, literally at a coffee shop, and that's kind of where like the title comes in, because like they just kind of bumped into each other, and then a romance ensues, and I love this. Hannah, who is the one getting the divorce, is a single mother. Well, she becomes a single mother throughout the course of the novel. She's dealing with abuse from the husband, being a piece of shit. The dynamic between the couple is great, between the girlfriend. I can't remember names today. I'm so sorry. The relationship that they build with the child is wonderful. She's a great kid, and she was a lot of fun to read about. This is deeply emotional and just a lovely romance, and I was like kicking my feet. I thought these two women had amazing chemistry with each other, even from the moment that they met, which was like a flashback scene to a holiday Christmas party hosted by the law firm that she previously worked at, and they were like flirting over the Christmas cookies like 10 years ago, and I was gagged. I was like, ooh, I thought the chemistry was great. And then just the emotional journey these two go on together is incredible, and I was giggling and kicking my feet, and I just love these two so much, and I really actually want to reread this one. And I gave this 5 stars. I loved this. And then I was like, yeah, this is the second 5-star from Haley Cass. I'm going to read another one. And I read her novella, Down to a Science, which is about, I'm pretty sure, an autistic woman who's in the sciences, becoming best friends with this woman that she meets at a bar. And their 3-year-long friendship / possibly courtship, because there's feelings ensued. So it's another friends to lovers sapphic romance, but this one is a short novella. And this was also excellent. I didn't love it as much as her full-length novels, but I thought she just knows how to write angst and tension and emotion and yearning and longing and chemistry and just everything. Everything was so good. I ended up giving Down to a Science 4.25, but I was like, this was an excellent romance still. I maybe said one main character's name that entire video, and I apologize, but I got things to do. We got, the holidays coming up. We gotta go do some shopping and decorating for Christmas. What did you read in November? I would love to know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in another one very soon. Bye!